Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you lovely folks joining me here nice and early at Marvel Snap Zone, and welcome back for your weekly installment of our Metagame tier list, where we break down for you the best decks in Marvel Snap right now that are dominating the ladder and the infinite rank. This week is going to be ever so slightly different. We actually want to take a second to talk to you about some of our own personal views on the current metagame before we start breaking down the actual data, regardless of whether it's my sultry tones here on YouTube you're listening to, or whether it's the original article by Den CCG that you're reading. If you don't much care for that, I'm going to put a time code on screen for you right now. You can skip ahead to that, where we'll start breaking down the tier list in full. But it feels important to kind of go over this right now, given the state of the metagame at the moment. I've been playing since the second month of beta, and Marvel Snap has honestly been great for me since then. There's a reason why I've spent so much time making so much content for the game. Even during the Zabu metagame, which I don't think we've seen a difficult metagame to enjoy quite like that one before, there were still avenues to having some fun. So let's not sugarcoat it. At the moment, Marvel Snap is not very fun for a lot of people, and I think most people have the same kind of culprits in mind for that. Even so, I think that's actually an indictment of a positive message overall. One, that we still have a game on our hands that interests a lot of people and it's having a ton of success. There wouldn't be much frustration or much outcry if we weren't invested in the game, attached to it, and if we didn't want it to succeed. So there are a lot of people out there right now who are expressing their desire to quit playing to us here at Marvel Snap Zone because of the current metagame and the current situation. And I want to say to you that I can't fault you, but I urge you to try and see this as a necessary step for Second Dinner to not repeat these mistakes in the future. It might be good to have this now, before we have a real competitive system in place, or before the ladder actually matters for something, or before teams start investing in Marvel Snap. There is no card game, to my knowledge, that has gone from a great format to a great format without any bumps in the road. This bump's a really big one, probably the biggest one yet, but it could be an important one to solve an issue that will hopefully never reappear in the future. Because of Lockjaw Thanos' ridiculous grasp on the metagame right now, we're seeing fewer and fewer decks surrounding it, and this report is going to share with you only 10 decks, the lowest number of 2023 so far. We're likely still 2 to 3 weeks away from a long-awaited balance patch, so it seems like we're going to have to make the best of our current environment for now. My personal advice is to pick an archetype you feel very comfortable on and play safe for the most part. Your grind might be longer that way, but at least you'll be in control of your cubes. With a heavy heart, let's get into the deck breakdown for this week. As always, if you are looking to compete on a budget with a slightly smaller card pool, there is some options available for you in our budget section this week. Tier 4 includes these decks that are falling off from the metagame right now and prove to be curveball choices that aren't really putting up the results required to succeed at the moment. There are a few new additions here this week, however. The Junk archetype is on its way back up somewhat based on some tournament appearances from various content creators and the subsequent success the deck is seeing on the ladder as a result of that. Deadpool kind of picking up steam and making its way back into Tier 4 this week as well, and the Discard deck starting to tumble, making its way down into the top of Tier 4, not really putting up any kind of showing this week. Tier 3 is a different story of a lot of decks trending downwards. Lockjaw Thor, one of our favourites for Pool 3 only in the past, has been usurped by a different Pool 3 only deck as the budget deck of choice, making its way down into Tier 3 at the moment. Galactus also trending downwards at the moment. Too much interaction out there for the big man right now, struggling to pull off quite as many wins as they would like in the long run. Electro Ramp proving to be a bit of a suffer from success at the moment, really not putting up enough endgame stats to fight with Shuri Zero or the flexibility of a deck like Lockjaw Thanos. And DeathWave continues to perform exceptionally well in the lower ranks, but continues to struggle significantly more as they reach the higher ranks of the game. Tier 2 this week, Zabu Darkhawk making a small resurgence, knocking itself back up into a higher realm of playability in order to keep that deck alive. Good cards DoomWave, a deck that we've been a big fan of on the channel for a while, is really starting to showcase exactly what a pool 3 only deck can do, and currently serves as the best all-round budget choice for players who are Series 3 complete. The Thanos Ongoing variation of Zoo still finds itself as a tier 2 option if you're looking for a way to play with the Mad Titan that is slightly different than everybody else. Tier 1 this week is not our top tier. We've got Sera Control appearing as the third best deck in the game, as the only deck currently with the stats required to hang with the big two, and Shuri Zero once again remaining a king of the mountain this week as a deck many players are looking to innovate on, but continuing to build on a very strong foundation. Last but not least, as previously mentioned in the intro, for the first time ever we have a Tier S in Marvel Snap right now. Thanos Lockjaw is proving to be miles and away much better than anything else you can be doing in Marvel Snap, as proved by the data from our tracker and recent tournament results. If you're looking for silent performers of the week, we have a few options this time around for decks who are putting up the right kind of win rate and cube averages but aren't being played enough to appear on the tier list. The Silver Surfer variants, of which I made Infinite myself this season, definitely picking up some steam as they go. Patriot making a bit of a resurgence, doing well into a pile of leeches from the opponent, and a Nimrod version of Shuri Ramp that we featured in yesterday's Infinite decks of the week, also picking up a little bit of steam to allow that deck to play back against Shang-Chi. So let's start breaking these decks down for you in full. We'll start with the big bad. Thanos Lockjaw continues to have an absolute dominating threshold on Marvel Snap right now. It is the best deck in the game, plain and simple. It is largely ahead when it comes to win rate, and it is the only deck above the 60% mark, and it's extremely well positioned when it comes to cube averages. Still, it's important to consider this deck is facing a large amount of mirror matches, which will actually lower its overall win rate, pushing it back down towards 50%, and a cube average pushing back down towards 0. Thanos Lockjaw has to be crushing everything else to maintain these numbers with such a high number of mirror matches. There are still a few non-believers out there claiming the deck is mostly about being lucky, but in my opinion there is no denying we have a claim at one of the strongest decks in Marvel Snap history right now. Moving down to Tier 1, Shuri Zero remaining a fan favourite and a very strong choice for continuing to climb. It is one of the few decks that is able to look Thanos Lockjaw straight in the eye and have a good shot at emerging victorious. Shuri Zero suffers more from being predictable in its play patterns against the other decks in the format. It seems a lot of decks will be trying to counter Shuri rather than Lockjaw because of this. It still has a very high win rate overall. It seems to be enough to keep the deck in the discussion for top of the class, but the key is to master your snap timing in order to climb with this deck. Zabu Sera Control making its way up into Tier 1 this week, mostly off the back of the fact Shang-Chi is the go-to card against Shuri Zero, and Killmonger is the go-to card against Thanos. Naturally, this deck contains both of the tools to fight the current top dogs in the metagame, and compared to the other two, the deck is definitely more demanding, as there's a bigger need for anticipation as to what your opponent's future turns might be bringing. The big difference compared to Thanos Lockjaw and Shuri Zero with this one is the win rate, which is much lower for a deck like Sera Control. The deck is often going to be retreating if it cannot find the right counter card, but when it does find what it needs to cancel the opponent's plan, it can make up for those retreats with lost cubes in one game and one game only. Well worth trying this one if you enjoy the reactive playstyle, as it is currently definitely trending upwards. Moving down into tier number 2, we have the alternative way to play with Thanos. Ongoing Zoo is still kind of living in the shadows of its much bigger and badder brethren, but it is still pretty good at doing what it does, and probably baits a lot of people into thinking it's a Lockjaw deck at its core. With Enchantress being left out of a lot of the reactive builds right now, this deck can be played with a quiet mind, and it seems really easy to anticipate what your points will be as a match progresses. Killmonger growing in popularity popularity may well be an issue for this deck, but armor is already in the build, and Professor X replacing Kazar isn't so hard to imagine either. Well worth keeping an eye on this one once we have some balance changes on the way. Possibly the most exciting part of this week's tier list is the Good Cards DoomWave deck finally getting some of the recognition that I feel like it deserves. It is the saviour of all those Series 3 only players out there. It's becoming a relevant deck using priority as its main strength to abuse the abilities of Aero and Wave first and foremost. The win is logically, not great in terms of rates compared to the powerhouses, but the simple to anticipate play patterns make the snap and retreat quite easy to figure out for a deck like this, leading to a decent cube average overall. As time passed, more players have reported good results with this deck, and it's only grown in our data so far in the past 2 weeks, showing it is stable enough to be considered as part of this metagame. Zabu Darkhawk remaining on the fringes of tier number 2. The control variant seems to be a better build around for Darkhawk right now, and it has solidified its position atop the rankings as a result. The proactive build isn't doing so bad either though, and it does benefit from Enchantress being gone from Sera Control for now, which would otherwise make it into quite a scary matchup. The best way to define this deck is a solid but not stellar pick. It's perfect for anyone who enjoys synergies around cards like Darkhawk and Dinosaur. Moving down into tier number 3, this time DeathWave making an appearance at the top of the class here. As usual, when Killmonger comes back as a strong metagame card, DeathWave sees a bit of a bump in its rating. For now, DoomWave gets the privilege of being the best Series 3 only deck, and over DeathWave mostly because Armor and Cosmo and Shuri Zero and Leech out of Thanos Lockjaw still prevent this deck from making any kind of real comeback. I guess seeing two decks with very similar play patterns this close in the rankings is mostly a testimony to Wave's strength and her ability to control the later turns of the game. If Sera Control keeps playing spoilers as the third best deck, we might see Wave-based decks improving in future weeks. Electro Ramp had a nice surge in popularity once Sandman's buff came into effect in February, and the deck recently welcomed Nimrod to complement the already included Arnim Zola. Nimrod also brought Shuri into the archetype, making Black Panther even stronger in the process. This 4-card core gives the deck some totally different lines in addition to the previous Doctor Doom and Odin lines, thanks to being able to play on several lanes at once when it needs to. For now, it doesn't seem like the new additions here have changed much about the deck's performance, but this metagame might not be the best to gauge the potential of a deck like this anyway. Galactus trending downwards at the moment for the first time since he joined the game. With Nimrod joining us, many saw good things for Galactus and were eager to see if it would change the fate of the Devourer of Worlds. Unfortunately, that appears to be a no for now. The deck is still very capable of climbing very well in the right hands in fact, but it would seem to require a masterful understanding of the snap and retreat mechanic, considering how easy it is to be countered with this one. Especially as Thanos Lockjaw is bringing back some lane disruption in its builds, with cards like Green Goblin and Polaris next to Aero being in almost every single deck. Galactus feels like a pretty risky bet right now. The bright side for Galactus is it has a decent matchup against Thanos Lockjaw, because you can Galactus on a lane the opponent has already heavily invested into and leave them with barely any options left. Once again, the timing of your snap is going to be crucial if you want to be getting them in here. At least Nimrod seems to have convinced most players to converge on the Electro build of this deck. It opens more possibilities around the new Battle Pass card, but as you can see with the previous entry, the pure Ramp archetype seems to do better than Galactus so far. The success of the Ramp archetype isn't so bad for Galactus though. It actually gives some form of concealment when you're playing Electro or Wave on turn 3. Previously, the opponent often snapped or retreated immediately as they knew the full story for sure. Lockjaw Thor was the Series 3 build-around of Lockjaw, and it's still quite popular among a number of players, although it really cannot compare to Thanos Lockjaw in any way at this point. Remember the times when we wondered which of the two of these decks was best? That case is definitely closed for good for now. Although nothing has really changed around this deck for quite some time, its results have been good enough to earn itself a spot on the ranking. However, for a deck previously ranked much higher, even competing to be considered one of the best in Series 3, it seems like Lockjaw Thor is suffering from the decks that are trying to counter Thanos Lockjaw. Also, Wave is really annoying for this deck, as it usually makes it much harder for you to play Mjolnir. As mentioned in the intro, this metagame is far from a good one. I could easily see somebody dismissing this entire report as they face their 5th Thanos, Lockjaw or Shuri Zero deck in a row, saying that the other decks don't matter anyway. I can't really fault you for thinking this, as I've done so myself already in the last few days. And I even refrained from writing last week and talking about a tier list last week, as it felt mostly pointless, considering the situation. We got to try and focus on the positives here though, such as the new silent performers of the week, with Silver Surf and Patriot slowly making a comeback. We have to be optimistic about the future of Series 3, as Wave and Aero are still powerhouses in their own right in various builds. All of these signs are pointing towards what the metagame could be once we finally receive this balance patch. So let's hang in there, folks. Hopefully it arrives very soon. I mean, we are known to release this tier list right before major changes happen. As usual, if you want to talk to us about how you feel about this tier list or anything else Marvel Snap, you can come and find us in the community Discord server that you'll find in the description box down below, and let us know what you think. Alternatively, leave a comment down below, like and subscribe to the video channel here on YouTube, or you can come and find us on Twitter at Marvel Snap Zone, HowlingMines, or DenCCG. Just a quick reminder at the end of this video for folks on YouTube as well, that I'm going to be taking a short health break here on YouTube in order to just take a bit of better care of myself, so you'll be missing some videos over the course of the next week. But until next time, I've been HowlingMines, you have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care of yourself. Have a good one.